get us recording. Thank you. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee Board of Examiners for Architects and Engineers. Mr. Bursai.
Hey, all right. We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start with a roll call. Michael?
Thank you. Mr. Bursai.
Here.
Mr. Bricktop. Mr. Bricktop's absent. Mr. Thompson.
Present.
Mr. Parker. Mr. Parker? No, we're having trouble hearing you, Mr. Parker, but we show you online, so when you get the audio back, just let us know. Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Barrick?
Here.
Ms. Doss?
Here.
Mr. Tibbs? And Tibbs is absent. Mr. Wagster?
Here.
Mr. Heathcote?
I'm here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. Bursai?
Okay, I think we have a quorum here. I don't see any guests out there other than Casey Anderson, who will be reporting for societies in a bit.
Mr. Baltimore with the interior design is on virtually.
Okay, all right, great. All right, any announcements?
I don't have any per se. I do know, except for one, there was a question about an ID badge or something when it came to hotels. We have a way for you all to print off something that serves as a state ID. I have instructions for how to do that. It involves going to Edison. I don't know if you guys use Edison. We tried to do it for you, but we don't have the access. So I'll send you all the instructions on how to go in and print that out, and you can show that at the hotel or wherever it's needed.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Okay, any other announcements? Anybody? Okay, we were sent the agenda. If everybody's had a chance to review it, are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Sounds like the agenda is good for today. Professional society report. Well, let's before we get to that, minutes from the December meeting. Did anybody have any comments on the minutes for the December meeting? I had one comment just on the third page under conferences. In the first paragraph, there was a couple of times there was a reference to Michael and I attending the Southern Zone meeting in Greenville, South Carolina. And I think there was actually a reference to a potential MBA meeting in Greenville, not the Southern Zone meeting. Southern Zone meeting is in April. Any other comments on the meeting notes?
Yeah, I found a couple of cosmetic errors. One or two with the R and the S transposed in your name.
Alias?
Yeah, Mr. Busry.
No problem.
So we'll get those fixed as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now let's move to professional.
Do we need to approve those?
Oh, that's right. Okay, do I have a motion to amend the minutes from the December meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve with the changes noted by Ricky, as well as I think Michael said there's a few grammatical spelling kind of things that we need to kind of clean up. So I'll make a motion. If you will, just republish those after you've done that, just in case there's I would always like to see anytime the minutes are changed just to kind of double check, you know.
Sure thing.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? It's not. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Passes. Is Blair online yet? With him online, do we need to take a roll call, or is the voice acclamation okay?
Now, my understanding is that because there is a majority of the board here, that voice acclamation is sufficient. If we had a mixture and just a little bit of, just.
Any doubt?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But, unless Mr. Parker has yet to be able to voice his presence, so
Okay,
we're not sure if he's having technical difficulties or not. So,
got it. Okay, thanks. Okay, now we move on to professional society reports. Casey's here with us.
Thank you. Apparently, I will cover all of them, but I know nothing about the others. Although I did spend some time with Nathan this morning. He's sorry he cannot be here, and he said all of the things in an eloquent way that he normally does that I am not able to repeat in his voice. So, from the engineer side, we have a lot going on. We had a great senior principals forum on the snowiest day of the year. We had about a dozen people in person and about 80 people online for that. And it was just it was an opportunity for our senior principals in our engineering firms to look at some high level stuff. And among those topics that we talked about was a really good presentation from Smith Seckman Reed on cybersecurity and the ability of the importance of of us all of our firms taking a look at that and redoubling our efforts. And I just want to point out I'm happy to share the slides of that presentation. I do have permission to do so if anybody wants to see them. Really powerful stuff and really important, something that I think I would imagine at some point will affect all of us. So,
Hey, Casey, I want to thank you for finding a unicorn, an IT guy who could speak in terms that everybody else could understand.
well, my guess is that Rob Eric had something to do with his hire at some point along the line, and Jeff Swayze is one of the more outstanding presenters I've seen on any topic that comes to risk management ever in my life. So I'm hoping he'll continue to do that. I thought he was great. Thanks, Alton. We are working toward ACEC National. We've been working with them on a new study on QBS and why qualifications-based selection is still what it does to improve projects, both from a cost standpoint and from a quality standpoint. As soon as it's ready, it's kind of and when associations do studies and things like that, it legally is done by an outside, we've got outside people working on it through NYU. So as soon as that's done, I'll share it with you all, but I've seen a draft of it and it really is excellent. And there's one of the 30 or so projects that's highlighted in there is a private project in East Tennessee. So I'm really excited to show you that when it comes out, because I do think it will be a really powerful message, and it builds upon the original study that was done 20 years ago, I believe. So all of that's going on. TSBE, which is, as you all know, I don't think I said on the record who I am. Sorry, Casey Anderson, ACC Tennessee. TSBE. So TSBE is the professional association. That society decided in the last few months that it is now a state-only membership, which has been a really good thing for us, and are encouraged. We will be offering at least 15 free PDHs to all of those members across the state, and excited about the ability that the hybrid models has offered us to really amp up some of that programming.
Hey, Caleb, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Check.
Caleb?
I'm not Caleb, but we can hear you.
Hold on a second, Katie. Sorry about Mr. Parker. This is Michael. Can you hear me? Okay, we're still having issues with Mr. Parker. I'm going to see if I can fix that for you. Sorry, Casey.
You're good. So across the street, obviously, we're up and moving with the legislature right now. Excited that the governor's state of the state, so his proposed budget includes in addition to all of the federal money coming, an additional $626.5 million for transportation and infrastructure, and an additional $2.75 billion for capital projects and maintenance. Haven't had coffee today. Apologize, but really excited about those budget numbers. So obviously they're not final until that budget passes through the legislature, but really excited about what he has coming down the road. The bill that you all had asked the governor to carry that deals primarily with the engineering licensure barriers and some new pathways there, but also includes a little bit about the landscape architecture. The governor's office, the administration chose not to carry that this year, but Senator Lundberg has decided to pick it up along with John Crawford in the House. They do have a constituent who is affected by that bill, who this would give an opportunity for licensure. So he's pretty passionate about it. It's Senate Bill 2479. In the House, it's 2627. We need your help, honestly. I mean, it's your language. You all came up with it. We've spent, 5 years now talking through it and making sure how you all were comfortable with the way those pathways to licensure mapped out. The way the bill sits right now as introduced is exactly your language. And we would very much appreciate, and it would help quite a bit for you all to be supportive of that bill. There has been some question about the final section of that bill deals with landscape architecture. I will be honest, sometimes when y'all start talking about things that I don't directly affect the people for whom I work, sometimes my brain shuts off, because if I fill it with other things, some things I didn't need to know will fall out. So I'm not sure I am fully up to date on why the landscape architecture section was written the way it was, and would appreciate some feedback there, because I am serving as the sort of liaison on that bill to the bill sponsors. So we can get to that when we get to it. Excited to let you all know, if you don't already know, that LMU, Lincoln Memorial University, is starting a new engineering school. I've met with their new dean, Ryan Overton. One of the things that I thought was great, I know Michael has met with them. I know Robert's going to. Really excited about what they're doing. What I was the most thrilled about is there was some conversation of whether they put that engineering school on their satellite campus in Knoxville or whether they left it at the main campus. And the Dean Overton is really passionate about that needs to be a full college experience for those engineering students, and how hard they work when they're there, and that how important it is to have that cohort together. So I was thrilled to hear that, and I know he's going to continue to reach out to most of us about different aspects in ABET and all of that stuff.
Casey, do you know what field of engineer? I'm sorry, Robert.
No, I'll go ahead and ask the question. I can help answer some.
What field of engineering they're going to offer?
Yeah, they're going to start out, and I'm having lunch with him next Friday, I think is right. But hell, maybe tomorrow, I don't know, but sometime on a Friday. But they're going to start out in civil engineering, and then they hope to go into a couple other disciplines. But he's, from what I've talked to him, they got a pretty good plan. They're going to start out very small. He's going to teach a lot of the classes, and then they're going to kind of bring on faculty as they go. And for those that don't know, Lincoln Memorial University is located in Harrogate, Tennessee, which is right below Middlesboro, Kentucky, on the line. And in the last 10 years or so, they've got a gentleman that graduated from there, Pete DeBusk.
Blair Parker
Is
now joining.
Okay, good. Who has helped fund a lot of things. They've got a DCOM program, which is a medical program. They've done a huge amount on nursing, but they're really focused on rural communities. Again, they're in a rural community, but their graduates come from those rural communities, and they're trying to get them to go back to these places. And as engineers, that excites me, just because, some of the issues we have as a board are these rural communities typically get services from people that are not as qualified because it's the only person in that small town, whatever. And they're doing the best they can. So if we can kind of help promote spreading out engineering into some of these smaller places, and I think that's part of their mission, I think that's a really good thing for engineering in Tennessee to get, help in a lot of levels. But I mean, good question, Alton. But yeah, civil engineering. I went further because I just wanted to kind of give you an update.
Yeah, I think that's great. Obviously, there are probably more civil engineers than most other disciplines, and I agree with everything that you just said. The rural areas of Tennessee desperately need that kind of help and guidance and assistance. So I applaud them for focusing on that. Casey, will they need? Obviously, they'll be part of, I would assume, maybe not this year, but next year's grants to colleges.
I talked to him about that was a long-term opportunity for them, but that I didn't know the qualifications because they're not currently an ABET accredited program.
It's going to take them about 4 years to get accredited. According to my conversation with them, we did discuss the grants program, and like Casey, it was a long-term discussion.
If I remember, though, correctly, when Lipscomb started their program, they were able to, if there was some assurance that they would achieve ABET accreditation by the time their first graduating class got to graduation point, that they could continue the engineering discipline and curriculum. And I'm not sure what our rules say. Do we say that because obviously we're doing landscape architecture, interior design, those aren't ABET accredited. The schools have to be officially accredited, or they're on path to be accredited.
I believe that the rules state, I could be wrong, I have to look this up, but I believe that it says that the program must be accredited by some governing body. So like the landscape architects, there's an accreditation that goes along with those programs. I don't recall, in the 2 years I've been doing the grant, working with you all on the grants program, I don't think we've ever received an application from a program that was not accredited.
Can we verify that just to make sure? Because obviously somebody like a new startup entity could significantly benefit from access to those funds if they would be eligible. I'd really enjoy the opportunity to allow them to participate.
The thing I did mention to him when we were talking about that was that I thought it's a really great opportunity at the retreat to come because everyone's here, and how much value there is in sitting around and making sure you get to spend some time with those deans at other schools and how helpful they would be. So he was really interested in at least coming, whether or not he's able to get a grant, but being a part of that group, I think, would be important. Thank you for thinking about them. So, Robert, when you have lunch with him, you mentioned that we're all on board.
And they've one other quick thing too. They also started a law school, and it wasn't like they went out and hired. They hired the Gary Wade, who was Supreme Court. I think he was the Chief Supreme Court Justice, state of Tennessee. So this school's trying to do it right.
They're going all in, for sure.
So.
Engineers Week, the week that nationally we celebrate all things STEM and engineering, is coming up end of this month. I would encourage you all to ask around in your local communities as to what people are doing. I think I'm going to 3 banquets that week, and there's just a lot of movement, a lot of activity, so that's exciting. And then immediately on the heels of Engineers Week on Tuesday, March the 1st, the engineers are having their day on the Hill. And so you're all welcome to join us there if you so desire. And then on Tuesday, March the 8th, when Ashley, I'm sure will mention this, but AIA and the construction industry are having their days on the Hill. We will also be having a joint legislative reception, ACEC, AIA, ABC, AGC. That's what you all have an invitation to on your desk. And we would love for you all to attend. And that is shockingly all I have. I really appreciate being here.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
question.
the bill, do you need to know, would it be helpful for the board or whoever to talk about why the landscape architecture piece is here or
I
not?
believe it's on your agenda later today. Am
Okay,
I correct, Michael?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get Mr. Parker on. What's
Yes, and he asked if it would be helpful to have some clarification on the landscape architecture. Can we cover that in the legislative section
If
so
you're-
that Mr. Parker is on?
Yeah, if you're going to be here, we show Mr. Parker is on. Blair, are you able to hear us?
Tap dance well.
Live streaming.
Okay, everyone, we're going to take a break. Apparently, nobody can hear us online.
We haven't missed anything yet. It's fine.
Oh, are there any other questions for Casey while she's up there? Anybody?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, everyone, let's take a break until we can figure this out.
Okay.
Thank you. I can let Casey kind of briefly recap what she had said earlier, and then we'll pick up the agenda from that point. Okay, are we recording? Go for it.
Him on those programs, and we're very excited. I will be sharing with you as soon as it's complete a qualifications-based selection study that ACC National has asked for that will provide a lot of information that I think will be very valuable for this group. And finally, among the many bills that we are working on across the street, one of them is Senate Bill 2479, House Bill 2627 by John Lundberg in the Senate, by John Crawford in the House. It is the exact language of the bill that you all asked the governor to carry, the administration to carry, that deals with the pathways to licensure for engineering technology degrees, master's degrees, and handles the decoupling issue. It also, so I would love your support on that. It is, as I will remind you, your bill, your language. So I'm of the opinion that your support is obvious. However, that needs to probably be official. There is also the final clause of that, in the language of that bill, deals with landscape architects. And there, we would love some clarification on that. I am sort of helping the sponsors with talking through the bill and making sure they understand everything. And I will be honest, I am not sure I fully understand the intent of the language on the landscape architect portion, and would love some clarity from the board on exactly what you're trying to do there and why that is the language you chose to put in that bill. The end.
Great. Thank you, Casey. And
Shortest ever.
we'll cover your landscape architecture question in the legislative update. Okay, Ashley.
Morning, everyone. Ashley Cates, Executive Vice President for AIA Tennessee. I will be short and brief too. So this past year, over the past several years, we've worked with the Tennessee Career Guide to focus on having architecture as part of the highlights of a profession. And so this year, we once again signed up with them to promote the profession. The guide goes out to the juniors across the state and high school and counselors' offices, and I believe they're also having an electronic PDF version that can also be emailed out, just to be able to share with individuals. So we're supporting that. Also, we're excited about the possibility. The Civic Design Center in Nashville has a program called Design Your Neighborhood, and it's completely staffed, and they go out and partner with the schools to talk about and bring in students, probably lower income students, and educate them and work with them on designing your neighborhood. And so really getting in and hands-on experience and giving them kind of a charrette feel to letting them have a powerful voice in what they want their neighborhood to look like. And also that's just the pipeline, right, for going into architecture. And so we're excited to hear that there's the program, I believe, is going to be started in Chattanooga. So I think they're going to be looking for some grant funding, and the Tennessee Architecture Foundation will probably take up. They supported the Design Your Neighborhood several years ago, and the foundation will probably also support this program as well. So we're hoping that if it goes well, then we can just jump on over to Memphis and Knoxville. So we have that going on. Of course, legislative session is happening. We are also excited about the capital outlay with $2.7 billion in improvements and maintenance, much needed across our state, in vertical infrastructure. And we're also excited the historic development grant that last year was a pilot project with $5 million. It's now at $10 million. And so we will be working with ECD to see how that program is going and how it rolls out and how we can help educate the public in both urban and rural areas on the projects there to be able to get some money for that funding. Moving along, we have we're working with AIA Kentucky and AIA Indiana to provide a disaster assistance training, really focused on architects. We work with Nces additionally on promoting their courses throughout the year. But with the recent disasters, AIA National is helping us with a curriculum to provide online training. So we're going to be rolling that out April 19th and 20th, I believe, and excited about that program to try to reach additional individuals to become educated on that, particularly tornado season quickly upon us, or I guess sometimes it's already here, right? We are having our conference, our state conference in August in Chattanooga. So Rick, we're going to be down your way, and it's going to be August 10th through the 12th, and we're excited. We're pulling together a lot of really great speakers for some CE opportunities there. And on top of CE, I have now been, I'm not sure this is a load, but AIA National has a continuing education committee, and I was recruited to participate on that committee. So I am into Monday will be my next call, my second call of the year on that group, and I'm learning a lot. So if you have any recommendations or want to talk to me about that particular thing, I'm sitting quiet and listening and learning for the most part probably this year. Let's see. I believe, and the Noma Conference, the National Organization of Minority Architects, they're having their national conference here this year. We're excited to have them. We've partnered with Noma. There's a Noma chapter in Memphis and a Noma chapter in Nashville. They will be in Nashville October 2022. I don't have the specific dates, but I can update you all at the April meeting. So that is what I currently have for you if you have any questions.
Ashley, and congratulations on your position. And our Tennessee architects know now they have a direct pipeline to those continuing education credit questions they have.
Right.
So, good. Any questions for Ashley?
This isn't a question, Ashley. I'm sorry. I forgot to congratulate publicly Casey Anderson.
Yes.
Yes, the
Tennessee Society of Association Executive.
Yes.
Executive of the Year.
Yes, that's exactly right. I forgot to do that.
It's a great organization.
Sorry to interrupt, but when he said congratulations, that hit a bing in my mind.
No, it's very
Sorry
deserving. Yeah, she
that.
works hard. That's an association for associations. So Casey and I have an association.
That's great.
We don't have professional reports though.
Okay. Is Don Baltimore still on? Okay, Don?
Yes, good morning. Sorry I cannot be there in person today. But other than to report that we, the Tennessee Interior Design Education and Advocacy are not able to be there in person, but we're willing to work with the board and the other societies. So I didn't know whether you could hear me or not.
We can hear you, yes.
Oh, good. Good. I'm sorry, because I'm watching it at both places. I'm watching it online, and that's a few seconds behind when I'm speaking, so I couldn't tell. So, but we're excited about the working with everyone for the legislative year, but the interior design do not have any major legislation that they are proposing and pushing for adoption this year. So that's all I have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Don. Any questions for Don? Okay, Don, thank you for that report. And Nathan's not online with us this morning, correct?
No, he had passed his. He met with Casey this morning. That's how the questions about the landscape architecture portions of the submitted bill came up.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, well, that's all the professional society reports. We can move on to the legal case report. Stuart?
Good morning. Stuart Huffman, Associate General Counsel. Start with number 1, 2021-073-861. Complainant's contractor Brock responded to complainant's house in April 2021, stating that the county required a set of drawings for a home remodel in order to issue a building permit. Respondent stated that he would prepare a complete set of plans with all information required by the county, and specifications included to follow all codes. The plans took months instead of 2 weeks as promised. Further, the final product produced by respondent was not up to code per the building official and contractor. There was also no specification sheet as promised. Respondent states that the original scope included inspection of the foundation of the existing house and preparation of plans to meet the county requirements for a residential building permit. Respondent told complainant he would prepare floor plans for both floors, inspection of existing house, coordination with contractor, and elevations for proposed house with some details of how to connect the proposed house framing to the old foundation. Respondent claims he was overwhelmed with projects but did submit a 11-sheet set of plans after answering inquiries from the county codes and meetings with the contractor. Respondent also stated that he and his son contracted COVID in September of 2021, and unfortunately, the son passed away in October. After review, the respondent provided a set of stamp plans that appeared to be very complete. The structure was measured in detail and designs were provided, including wall sections, typical structure size, foundation depth, and similar details that should be sufficient to build the structures. Every finished detail was not provided, but it seemed the scope was far more structural design. There does not seem to be any violations. However, there is a discrepancy in the scope to be provided. This was reviewed by board member Robert Campbell. Mitigating factors are no violations found and complete plans provided to complainant. The recommendation is to issue a letter of caution regarding the necessity of clear scope and project deliverables.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Alton?
Sorry, just one real quickly. Is it ordinary that we, with a letter of caution, also require the laws and rules exam? And in this case, do you think that's necessary?
I mean, if you want to require that, I don't have any problem with that. It seemed like he followed the laws and rules pretty well. So, I mean, I'm not real bent out of shape on that. I think the homeowner was expecting a complete set of house plans with foundation. And I think he was under the impression that he was to provide a set of foundation plans with elevations to make those foundation plans work, to be able to add a second floor to this. And what I also found in here was, it was kind of funny that everybody said he did wrong, but it was the building code official that passed his plans, right? I mean, he approved his plans and then comes back and says, oh, no, they're wrong. But the details were good. I mean, you had connection details, you had framing details, you had measurements, there were photographs taken. It was an old stone foundation basement that they were redoing. So, I mean, it was not just a simple ask. And, this is what we all kind of get into sometimes, is the owner thinks one thing, we think another, and we try to write the scope to make sure it's as clear as possible. And then on top of that, he didn't communicate very well, or they didn't have expectations on the front end of how long certain things should take. So, long-winded way of saying, I think he did fine on the laws and rules. I mean, if you want to ask to do that, I'm not opposed, but I think his thing was just the scope wasn't very well defined.
I'll defer to counsel.
I've got a question that applies just to make sure we all remember. A letter of caution, is that considered discipline that has to be reported in other states, or it is not the level of discipline?
It's informal discipline.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be reported.
And doesn't go, it's not a disciplinary, it doesn't go on a record that has, okay.
No, it
Okay.
just goes in their file. But it's nothing public.
Okay.
It's not formal.
My memory is in past cases when we don't feel like somebody did something wrong to rise to the level is that we backed off from making them take the laws and rules test, unless there was a laws and rules infraction.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why in this particular case, if we're going to issue a letter of caution, if it's standard protocol to make them take the laws and rules, do we want to make an exception here and Robert, not require them to do that?
I just didn't think that was necessary, but
I would say that it's not standard. If there's a violation of a rule or law, then that would be more appropriate to have them take the exam. But it's not a standard thing of letter of caution to have the exam also.
Steve?
This structure exceed the minimum threshold? It did not.
no, but it needed some structural attention because, I mean, obviously they were going to add a second floor, and the existing basement foundation was stone that was starting to buckle and had deficiencies in it, and he put a good framing system in there. It like he did his work like he should.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Moved.
Can you say what's moved for the record?
Accept the recommendation.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. I think Frank got in there just before Blair. Any more discussion? All right, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? All right, motion passes.
And we're getting too old to hold our breath for.
Okay, I'll say.
Let
Yes, sir.
us rip.
Yes, sir.
And number 2, 2021-072-091. This complaint was administratively opened. A few business articles were published regarding proposed developments in Tennessee. Respondent was listed as a co-owner of the LLCs that proposed the developments. Respondent is a licensed architect in Florida, but not in Tennessee. There is no proof that any developments have started or plans have been submitted. It seems that the property owner has been soliciting the local planning board and commissions to develop the land and offering options. There's no mention that respondent would be the architect of record for any development. This was reviewed by board member Frank Waxter. Recommendation is a letter of caution advising respondent is required to comply with the architectural registration laws and rules of the state of Tennessee if there is intent to pursue projects requiring an architect in the state of Tennessee.
Any comments or questions? Alton?
Just real quickly, Frank, and again, you reviewed this, and I always kind of appreciate your review comments. Did this individual hold himself out as an architect in the state that's practicing architecture here?
Well, I guess what started it was there was a article, I think, in a Memphis newspaper, business newspaper, and it had a picture of a building, and it said so-and-so architect. And I think the developer had actually put that in there. This guy is a registered architect in Florida, but the article was basically, here's what we'd like to do. But there was no, he hasn't designed anything, and he may or may not have even been aware that it was in the paper. It was developer rendering he had blooming in Florida, but that was noticed, and it noticed that there was his name was on there, and so that's how it got to here. But this particular guy he wasn't trying to hold himself out as an architect in Tennessee or advertise. Name just happened.
I will add to that this person is from that area, and so it was kind of, it's a local person, but it did say that they were an architect in Florida, not in Tennessee.
Other,
To accept the recommendation.
okay, yeah, that's a motion to accept. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right. That was an aye officially. Delayed aye. Okay, Stuart.
Number 3, 2021074251. An anonymous complaint alleges unlicensed activity from respondent since 2006. Complainant alleges respondent is practicing architecture without a license and letting people think they are a licensed architect in Tennessee and other multiple states. Respondent lists several projects above 5,000 square feet and 3 stories or more in residential, multifamily, and commercial categories on the LLC website and social media. Respondent states they do not solicit work that requires a licensed architect. However, at times they are asked for or asked by residential clients or their associates to perform work that might require a license. All work performed under the LLC that is required to have a licensed architect. All work is performed. The work is completed under the supervision and partnership with a licensed architect who is the principal architect and partner with respondent. Nearly 100% of the work the LLC performs are residential projects not requiring the supervision of a licensed architect due to the small nature of the projects and exemptions. The LLC website has only been up for a few months and is clearly not complete, yet the website was done by a third-party template and respondent's name was listed as a practicing architect and urban planner. Respondent fully accepts her responsibility and states they should have reviewed more completely before allowing the third party to upload. The architect information was immediately removed from the website. Respondent further states that the website is still under construction. Social media sites state the LLC is a residential design studio. Review of the social media website show the use of the appellation architect, and comments from clients mention respondent as an architect. Even the respondent's wife calls him a great architect. This could lead to the public believing the respondent is a licensed architect. This was reviewed by board member Brian Tibbs. The aggravating factor here is using the appellation of architect without registration. The recommendation is to issue a civil penalty of $1,000 for using the appellation of architect without proper registration.
So Brian's not here to ask questions, but are there any comments? Alton.
Again, I do have one. I'm assuming that since a civil penalty is being assessed, that this would be accompanied by the respondent being required to take the laws and rules exam and pass it.
This person is not registered, so they would not be.
But is he proposing to do work in Tennessee, or holding out that they intend to do work in Tennessee and advertising that they are doing work?
Right. Well, there is a principal architect in the LLC that's actually doing the licensed work, but on the website it shows him as stating as an architect. But this person is not actually registered as an architect. All the work is being done under the supervision of the principal architect in that LLC. But if you want to add
in that case, I would is $1,000 enough?
That's standard with the aggravating factor.
Okay. Rick?
Question.
Unmute.
I have a question, and that is, if he is not a registered architect and he does not choose to pay this penalty, what can we do to follow up on that? How does this impact his business and the architect that is licensed? That they work together. I mean, I don't know that. I don't know what the guy's business is, but $1,000 fine for someone who's not an architect. I just say, so what? So, just curious what the ramification would be.
Question. Frank, you have our attention.
Yeah. Let me bang it a few more times. Yeah, I guess my question there that kind of falls on what Alton was saying, and I know this isn't against the registered architect, but apparently when it comes to needing an architect stamp, his buddy, I'm going to call him his buddy, his co-worker does the work. And is this a shared website? Does it have the other architect? You know, so in a way, the other architect's allowing this to happen. And so it makes me think, at the very little, he ought to take the laws and rules exam.
Is the fine still to this
still goes
to this respondent respondent?
Yeah, that's allowing him to be called an architect and apparently telling everybody he is.
Yeah, and that I'm not sure Rick's question was answered about it. Do we?
I agree. I'd like for Stewart or Tony one to say, what recourse do we have if this guy just says, you can't punish me, I'm not an architect, I'm not paying the fine?
Are they liable for a fine if they're not a registrant from this board? If this board...
Because they're not holding themselves out.
Well, this person did break a rule. It is in the rule that if you're not registered and you hold yourself out as an architect, which he did on the website, listed himself as an architect, he admitted it, then our rules have a fine in there for somebody who unlicensed practice. But the technical question is, is that person liable for that kind of fine from this board since they're not a registered? I don't know how we would fine somebody for unlicensed practice ever.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a rule for unlicensed activity, I mean, it's a violation of the rule, so it's under the jurisdiction of the board. I mean, that they're placing themselves under the jurisdiction of the board, so you have recourse. Whether the person wants to pay the penalty, that's up to them, but we would still go to a formal hearing, and you would still be able to issue another penalty or not. I mean, that would be under the discretion of the board. But whether they pay it or not, that's, we still would continue just like if they were registered or not, because they're under the jurisdiction.
It's a legal matter at that point.
Yeah.
Rick?
I'm not real clear on the licensed architect in the firm. Are they partners? Do we know what the corporate structure is?
It's a partnership.
So the partner who's licensed knows what's on the website, and
I can't answer that because I don't know if they do or not. I mean, this complaint was against this individual, not the LLC or not the partner, principal, architect, or anything. So I'm only focusing on this individual.
Yeah, that's a good point. The issue in front of us is the complaint against this respondent. There is no complaint right now against the firm or the architect. Any other comments or questions? Robert?
I think I'm leaning towards let's postpone this, and here's one of the reasons why. Is there a firm disclosure form that the architects have to fill out that says who's in charge of their office? And do we know if that's filled out in this case? So that would be one of the situations where I know, that keeps on the engineering side, and I assume it's the same on the architectural side. You're supposed to have a licensed person in charge of your firm in order to be able to offer those kind of services. And if that's not been done, that would be something else to me that would be a violation or potential violation if they don't have that. I would agree with Rick that it really the architect that is licensed, I mean, his name's there for a reason, to be in charge of the use of the word architect, right? I mean, he's licensed for part of that purpose. And if he's not keeping up with that, and his employees or his partners or whoever they are just walking around offering themselves up to be something they're not, that seems to me to be a little bit of an issue too. I know in our firm, if I had one of my surveyors went out and said, "Hey, I'm an engineer and I can go fix your problem," that would come back on me, I would think, because I'm engineer. So I would like to postpone this, get some more information on a couple of those kind of things, because I think even though this is maybe just a little thing, I think there's some issues within the industry, how you're structured and how things are put together, that can lead to some bad things for the public, because they think they're getting something that they're not, and I want to make sure that we avoid that if we can.
I'd like to respond to that.
Okay, go ahead.
I would suggest that you take the action on this complaint, and then you have the discretion to open up a complaint against the LLC or the
other architect.
Right. And then we would administratively open a separate complaint, and then we can look into those items that you mentioned. But that's my suggestion, is to go ahead and take care of this business, and then we can look into the other.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, that was my question. Don't we have the latitude, if we feel like there's something else there, to open a case or open an investigation against the licensed professional in that office? And the other thing, is that licensed professional, do we know that he's licensed in this state?
I believe so. I can't, like I said, I focused on the individual. I didn't focus on the LLC at this point, but if we open a complaint, we'll know. But I would say that, yes, they are.
I like that. Just a comment. I like that suggestion, because there's a kind of a clear-cut set architect on a website, and he's not an architect issue. And then there's this other issue about the firm, which warrants another complaint. Will kind of smoke that out. So, okay, do we have a...
I'll make a recommendation then to approve the recommendation, or I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation to issue a civil penalty of $1,000 for use of the appellation architect without registration, with the understanding that the staff will open up a complaint against the LLC to determine if they are in compliance.
There's a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, Rick. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Number 4, 2021-079-781. Respondent self-reported that his license expired in 2016. He was not aware until recently when applying for reciprocity in Kentucky. Respondent's previous employer handled all the employee professional licensure, and for some reason the employer stopped renewing the license in 2016. Without the reminders from his employer, respondent states they forgot about the renewal, but they continue to complete the required PDH. Respondent left the previous employment in 2018. Since then, and respondent's reinstatement application in July of 2021, respondent performed small residential planning plans and garden designs as a solo practitioner. Respondent joined another firm and learned of the expiration when applying for reciprocity in Kentucky. Respondent immediately began to rectify the situation by taking and passing the required 24 hours of PDH, had his CLARB license renewed and paid the required fines and fees, and submitted the PDH coursework to CLARB for submission to the state for reinstatement. Respondent submitted the projects that were completed during the expiration time frame. Most of the projects are small in nature and fall under the exemption. One project was over 5,000 square feet in area and would require a licensed professional landscape architect to stamp. Respondent did stamp this project. This was reviewed by board member Blair Parker. Mitigating factors is employer usually handle the renewals. Aggravating factors are practicing on an expired license. Recommendation is issue a civil penalty of $500 for practicing on an expired license and pass the laws and rules exam.
All right. Thank you, Stuart.
I move we accept the recommendation.
Okay. There's a motion. Do I hear second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm finding it hard to imagine that somebody that was employed from 2016 to 2018 by one firm, and then as a landscape architect, and then had a sole practice, and then worked with another firm as a landscape architect. From 2016 to 2021, he only had one set of plans that he used his professional seal on.
Yeah,
May I jump into this discussion?
that's what I was waiting on.
Okay. Like you, I scratch my head and wonder how can something like this happen. The applicant had provided us at least 20 projects that he had been involved in over the past several years. And during this change of employment and things happening, it appears that the type of work that he was providing changed during that time. And so what he was working on was really small projects, most of which actually we can only find one project that would even require a stamp. So I can tell you that Stuart and I reviewed this very closely, and while I'm still scratching my head, I still truly believe that this is exactly what happened. So there's no evidence to suggest anything otherwise. And the applicant also, he responded to Stuart immediately. When Stuart had a question, he would respond to him immediately and provided whatever information that we needed. So he is trying to work through this. And anyway, that's our recommendation at this point. I'm not sure I've fully answered your question.
Alton. Okay. All right. We've got a motion and a second on the floor. Any other comments?
And thank you, Blair, for that clarification.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. We ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. I will mention, it has nothing to do with the case. I mean, not trying to reopen the case, that I think in the past we've discussed when a registrant does something that falls below the threshold of needing a registrant, that they still need to stamp if they're a registrant. They like a report, even a report or something, that they still need to put their stamp on plans. So if somebody who's not registered can design a 1,000 square foot house, but if you're registered, you need to go ahead and identify yourself as a registered architect. I think we've had that discussion in the past, but I don't. That's been a while. So I just.
Ricky?
Yes.
I don't remember that discussion, but I sort of feel the same way, and I can tell you that I believe this is accurate, that every drawing that was provided, most of which were conceptual drawings, were stamped by this individual.
Okay.
So, I sometimes question if it's something so conceptual, why do we have to stamp it even?
Right.
But that's a totally different discussion.
Yeah, it is a different discussion, but it would seem like a good time to at least bring it up.
Right, I was just going to add that there was a stamp. It's just that only one qualified. All the other ones were exempt.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
I think that's in line with our past discussions. Okay, Stuart, next case.
Number 5, 2021-078-061. Complainant works in an office that tracks occupied buildings with outstanding code compliance issues. Over a 6-month period, complainant states 2 clients have informed the office that respondent is non-responsive and the clients cannot move forward with approved plans, putting them in a difficult situation. Complainant further alleges respondent may have similar history with State Fire Marshal's office. The respondent denies the allegations and states that after 35 years in the industry that they've never had a habit of non-responsiveness. I'll just go through this pretty quickly because there was no proof that the respondent is violating any rules of professional conduct in this matter. The board actually received notice on January 25th, 2022 that the respondent had passed on January 17th. This was reviewed by board member Frank Waxter. The mitigating factors here is there's no proof of violations and the respondent has recently passed away, so the recommendation is to close.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Stuart?
Chairman, I move to accept the recommendation.
Okay, we got a motion. And a second from Robert. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
And number 6, 2022-000761. Respondent self-reported that he did not meet the required PDH credits after receiving the audit letter. Apparently, the respondent stated he had completed the required hours because he had not completed the required hours because his intent was to retire the license. However, he is only 60 years of age. The rule allows a registrant to retire the license at 62 years of age. Respondent believed he would be forced to give up his license if he was to retire before 62. Respondent states that he was inhibited in obtaining the required PDH hours by COVID, and he did not renew his AIA membership, therefore did not receive notices for meetings and conferences. Respondent understands that he should not have reported he was in compliance and should face a consequence. There was no intent to cheat the system. It was just to ride out the next 2 years in order to retire the license. Respondent states that he has only stamped 1 letter for a residential contractor and has been telling potential clients that he is retired. Respondent would request the board allow him to retire his license at the age of 60 versus having to give up his license. He would like to continue using the appellation of architect-retired. Respondent will need to complete the required PDH for the audit period of 2019-2021 as soon as possible. Since the license does not expire until 8/31/2023, respondent will be able to retire his license after his 62nd birthday in June of 2023. This was reviewed by board member Brian Tibbs. Aggravating factors here: falsified renewal paperwork and did not comply with the PDH requirement for the audit period. Recommendation is authorize a civil penalty of $1,500 for falsifying renewal paperwork and not complying with the required PDH in a 2-year period. Respondent will also need to pass the laws and rules exam.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Comments or questions?
Make a motion to accept the recommendation.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Number 7, 2021-079-301. Respondent self-reported disciplinary action in Louisiana that stems from older action in Oklahoma in 2014 and Colorado in 2016. Respondent answered no to a question regarding disciplinary action taken against him. Respondent had notified Louisiana of the previous cases in Oklahoma and Colorado. However, he thought the question regarding new cases meant more recent ones. Respondent states that there was no intention to falsify information or deceive the Louisiana board. Respondent reported the actions in Oklahoma and Colorado to this board in 2014 and 2016, respectively. No violations occurred in Tennessee. This was reviewed by board member Stephen King. Mitigating factors of no violations occurred in Tennessee. Respondent was issued letter of cautions for Oklahoma and Colorado. The recommendation here is to send a standard letter of caution for the Louisiana disciplinary action.
Move we accept the recommendation.
Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
Second by Robert. Any comments or discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
Number 8 is a representation. It's 2019-061-821. This one, originally, there was a Houston firm that opened up an office in Nashville, but they did not do a firm disclosure. And the decision back then was send a letter of caution to the respondent and require the principal architect to pass the laws and rules exam. So the new information on this is that the principal architect originally failed the exam and numerous requests were made to retake the exam but went unanswered. It was later determined that the principal architect assigned to remit the laws and rules exam was located in Texas, as the Nashville office was not fully operational. The firm registration was listed under the parent company and not the name of the subordinate or DBA respondent. The principal architect of the parent company has since left and his Tennessee license has expired, therefore invalidates the firm registration of the parent company. The parent company has also been dissolved in Tennessee. The firm that is located in Nashville is using the name of the subordinate company or DBA. This company is registered in Texas. It is not registered with the Tennessee Secretary of State, nor have a valid firm registration. It does have a principal architect that has a valid Tennessee architect license, but is located in Texas. So a new complaint will be filed for failure to notify the board of a new principal architect within 60 days and operating on a closed firm disclosure. Administration is also in contact with the firm in order to properly register this company in Tennessee. So the new recommendation is to close this complaint. It's no longer valid, but then a new complaint will be opened and we'll present that later.
Thanks, Stuart. Comments?
I'll make a motion to approve it. He failed the laws and rules exam.
Yes, but he's from Texas.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Frank seconds. Okay, any other comments? Questions? Rick?
Sorry. Never mind.
Okay, all right. The best kind of question is answered. Okay.
Well said.
That's right. Okay, any other? All right. We'll go ahead and vote then. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Stuart.
Welcome. That concludes legal report.
Okay, that leads us to the director's report.
Thank you, sir. I will lead off quickly with our financial statements that were included in your meeting material packet. Just a quick point out that as of the end of December, this board currently sits on a reserve of $2.8 million, almost 2.9, with expenditures certainly coming in that. But one of the things I'd like to point out about that number is that statutorily we have 2.5 years of reserve budget, operational budget on hand, which this $2.8 million does reflect. Any questions about the financial reports?
So that's what we're required. What are we required to have?
Yeah, if we got called up to the Hill for a sunset justification or something like that, they would want to see at least 2 years, 2 to 2.5 years of operational budget in reserves. And if you take the last 3 years, looking at anywhere from $1.3 million a year to 1.1 and some change, you're looking at about 2.6 ish, $2.6 million a year, or I'm sorry, $2.6 million for 2 years. So it just keeps us in line with where we need to be. So it appears to be a large number, but there's not a lot on top of it. Any other questions about finances that were submitted to you? Okay. The next item I have is the legislative update, which I believe Casey was going to play a little bit of a role in. Tony, did you want to say anything about the bill, or do you want me to just kind of?
No, I can.
Okay.
SB 2479 is in the legislature right now. That is the bill with the draft language that the board had provided, that the board had previously had conversations about. So it has been introduced, and so it should start moving it. That's the only bill that I have listed here that impacts the board. There's always ancillary bills out there that may have impact on all programs holistically. I say all programs within regulatory boards, such as how we conduct UAPA hearings, or how judges are required to interpret the law. There's some bills out there that would basically say that upon review in the Chancery Court of a formal hearing, that the judge is not to give any consideration to any board as to its own interpretation of its rules or statutes and whatnot. So those come up, time to time, and so I just say that because it would affect this board kind of generally, but nothing very substantive directly to your licensees within the profession. But again, yes, 2479, which it's SB 2479, HB 2627 is. You all had also mentioned earlier a question that we would address in the legislative update about the yearly grant authorization and whether there was an accreditation or non-accreditation question. And so that is always passed within the appropriations bill, and I pulled last year's appropriations bill for the $400,000 that was earmarked, and within the language of the bill it states that it's disbursement to accredited interior design programs, accredited architectural programs, accredited engineering programs, and accredited landscape engineering programs of any college or university in the state of Tennessee. Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you for that clarification.
Can I ask, Blair, can you go over the reason that the landscape architect component of the bill that we've just discussed? I think Casey had asked that question earlier, and I think I know the reason, but I'd rather for Blair to kind of go over that.
I was going to ask Casey if she could clarify that statement that she made earlier, so that Blair could.
She's back now. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I saw her, but then I didn't see her.
Sorry, had a little crisis on the phone. Blair, what the question that has come up, because I have listened intently to the engineering side of this bill for the last 5 years, or what has become this bill for the last 5 years, but I have not listened intently on anything that deals, no offense, with landscape architects. So I just want to, I'm not sure, there has been some question as to how broadly that changes the requirements for a landscape architect, and whether it is seemingly very broad, and just wanted to be able to talk through that with the bill sponsors in case questions come up in committee. I want to give them the tools to be able to answer them, and for the people who have concerns, for them to be able to consider whether that's the language that makes the most sense. Because as you all recall, this is no longer your bill, so it could get amended at any time by any people. I just want to make sure I have the board's intent, so that that's the message I'm carrying appropriately from there.
And Blair, I don't know if you have that in front of you or not, but do you want me to read that so that?
No, I'm good. I have it in front of me, and so let me first explain. And I believe that Robert and Frank, who are on the Landscape Architecture Committee, can certainly verify this. The way that the landscape architecture rules are written is that we have no flexibility to deal with any applicant that has extenuating circumstances. So what's in this bill was an effort to provide the committee and the board additional flexibility, plain and simple. And it was modeled after the engineers' education and experience requirements, which is section, 120.01-10. It was modeled after this. Most of the language is verbatim. But that's where, that's how we decided to approach this. And as I read this, I think maybe the question is, and let me read the paragraph. It says, if an applicant does not hold a degree accredited by the Landscape Architectural Accreditation Board, whether obtained in the United States or otherwise, that is substantially equivalent to a degree from an LAAB accredited program, the board may consider the following factors and approve the applicant in its discretion. That's probably, if there are questions about this, I would imagine that's where it's coming from. Does that sound correct,
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Okay. And the thought here, and it was Robert who really gave us the idea, I believe that in the engineering side of things is that they have an individual, I think Dr. Smith maybe currently is, that an individual to review the education of an applicant to determine whether or not it was equivalent to an LAAB program degree. So that, you see where I'm going?
I do.
That was really the intent of what we were trying to do here, is to give the committee and the board a little more flexibility in dealing with folks with just extenuating circumstances.
And Casey and everybody in the room, I think the reason this was added was because this was another law change that had to be made, and so it was easier to put it with ours instead of trying to make a separate law up that would have to go forward. But Blair's right, is they've had a lot of landscape architecture programs are relatively new from education accreditation and all that kind of stuff, and so you have some people that have been practicing landscape architecture for 30 plus years that may not have graduated at that time from a program that was accredited, but they're the ones teaching the next two generations of landscape architects. So we thought it was appropriate to give the landscape architect committee some flexibility in evaluating that curricula and then approving them for licensure if they so chose. And we do the same thing with engineers, but I think it is kind of weird that it's tacked on to the end of all this discussion about engineering, and then all of a sudden, oh, here's landscape architect. But it was easier, I believe, from going through the legislative process to have it all put together.
I will say particularly problematic is that the way that the bill just filters through our systems that we look at, the title of the bill includes landscape architects no longer need a degree or something to that effect, which is not in fact what it does, but that's why the question has come up and several people have come to ask me about it. Thank you for that clarification. I can definitely work with that. I just want to make sure that I can educate the sponsors correctly on everything the bill does so that they're not caught off guard in committee. I appreciate it.
Great. Casey, thank you. I'm glad this came up.
Thanks.
And I'm glad we had this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Thank you.
Hey, Blair, this is Michael. I would, if Casey's bringing this to us, I would also maybe encourage you to reach out to Mr. Ridley and have a discussion with him regarding the same questions that Casey has just brought up here today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll do it.
So the next part of the question is, from our standpoint, is I mean, this is something this board's put, I know on the engineering side, have put a ton of time and effort into. And a lot of the things that we have done have been at the request of the administration to try to make, improve the flexibility and make it to where we're protecting the health, safety, and welfare, but we're also bringing the best and brightest into the profession and allowing them to be licensed. So is it appropriate that this board would then be able to say, we approve, I mean, we're behind this bill. I mean, we wrote it. we've been working on it, and we've done it in conjunction again with administration. So it's not like it's something that's coming from left field. And I think that's a question that gets asked at different legislatures. Well, what's the AE board think about this? Well, I mean, we can sit here and say, hey, we've written the thing, so I mean, surely to God we're okay with it. But I think having something formal may kind of give some teeth to that. That's just a question. I don't know the procedure for that, but I'll shut up.
Question, Alton, comment.
Casey, is that something what Robert just talked about, that that would help, would be an asset in assisting past that legislation?
I'll be honest.
And can the board do it?
I think it's a problem for the industry to go in and try to change things like this significantly without the backing of the licensure board. And I think it's a question that will be asked very frequently. So yes, I think it's important.
And then I would ask Tony and company.
Alton, this is something that I floated up the poll yesterday for discussion. Nothing definitively has been decided yet, but like Robert said, there's this group penned the bill and voted it out of the board, and that's kind of a ringing endorsement in and of itself. So let me take a look at that from a departmental standpoint, administrative standpoint, and I can get back to you on that.
Can we do this? Can we just say right now that this board supports the endorsement of this piece of legislation, and then when you find out whether or not we can formally do that and what format we can do it in, then authorize you to move forward or give Casey whatever she needs to make that clear to the legislature?
Oh, it's formally on the record now. So I think that the statement is made clear. The question is whether or not in that legislative situation, as a representative of the board, I think that's what you're asking, right?
The concern is that this legislation is in some level of activity and some level of review. And if this board's endorsement, if we're able to give that, would aid in its passage, then I would think the sooner the better. Right, Casey?
I've got a question. Okay. So the people who are looking at this bill, I mean, they don't know, the people asking you questions, they don't know who wrote it, where it came from. Did somebody in the corner of the state write or whatever? And is it not enough of an answer to say the bill was written by the AE board and it's on record that we voted on it and approved that as legislative proposal?
Yes.
Is that not enough to answer them?
It should be, but I will also get questions because it's unusual for legislation that comes out of a licensing board or any kind of regulatory board to not go through the legislative agenda.
Okay.
So it's not being carried by the leader in the House, and the Senate is being carried by, that's where the governor's bills are carried,
right?
Administration bills. It's being carried by two people who aren't particularly involved in government operation. They're not, committee wise, et cetera. This isn't usually their wheelhouse.
Right.
So and in the past, when the bill that we sunsetted a couple years ago for the master's degree, for example, that came from a legislator on behalf of a constituent.
Right.
So the education here, I plan to meet with everyone. It will go through the Business and Utilities Subcommittee in the House and the Commerce Committee in the Senate, and I plan to sit down with each and every one of them to make sure, every one of those members, to make sure they don't have questions and understand it.
Right.
But I would foresee that the question would come up, like, I don't carry bills I don't carry bills, to be clear, but we don't typically bring bills to legislators on behalf of government entities. So that's why that support is important, because it's not going in the normal process that it would go through from an administrative bill kind of standpoint.
I just wondered if it would be totally redundant for us to make a motion and pass it when we've already made a motion and passed the legislation, and is that not enough to tell them?
I'm good. I
mean, I don't have a problem.
I don't like to
making another
overstep I'm trying to be respectful of the boundaries
Yes.
under which I am operating.
And I don't have a problem making a motion and having a vote, but I didn't know if this legal question was held up, whether we can already consider it having been approved by the board. Frank?
Yes, it's my understanding this legislation has not been passed. And then one of the things Casey brought up when she first started her spiel was that you never know what gets tagged onto these things. And that's a definite possibility. Who knows? But I think that's a risk we would run. I think we could say we support the bill as is right now. But if we say we support the bill and somebody tags on some who knows what, requiring engineers and whoever,
Right.
whatever it is, that is a risk we run. Just blatantly supporting the bill, however it turns out.
Good point. Good point. Casey?
You can clearly give direction that in its current form as introduced, you are supportive of the bill. As introduced. That can be in the motion. And then anything that gets changed, let's, knock on wood that
right.
doesn't happen.
Right.
Then you lose that support.
Okay.
Yes, that's a regular part of the life.
I'd like to point out that we kind of went through this exercise a little bit at the annual meeting, Casey's annual meeting last year, where we knew this was going to be a topic of conversation. Obviously, if somebody walks up to you on the street and says, tell me about this bill, you've got the information, right? You know what to say. And I'm not saying that I don't think it would be appropriate for you to say, here's what we did. It just, like it was just brought up, when it gets down into it, if it changes, whatnot, all of a sudden you're backtracking. I believe it's perfectly acceptable for you all to talk about your work on the bill or on the language, right? Because that's what it was. It wasn't a bill yet. It was language. So it'd be appropriate for you all to talk about your work on the language, and the intent behind it. As for when you call it an official endorsement, that prompts a different response, right? So if it's a general conversation where somebody's saying, tell me about this, that's different than making a public statement as a body within this department, which would require us to take a look at it.
Robert?
I think, though, it's very appropriate to be able to legally, I don't know if this is the right, legally is probably not the right thing, but appropriately say that this bill's introduced was crafted, or the language of this bill's introduced was done in conjunction with the Architects and Engineers Board and the administration. I mean, that's a true statement.
It is, but again, as you know, messaging from this board a public message from this board needs to be approved through proper channels.
I understand that, but we've got this, but then we had the conversation that this has been in the minutes, this has been in all the conversations that we've had, so it is de facto public record, I would guess, because we have that in our minutes, we have that in our discussions that we've had here at the board, that this language was crafted as introduced by the Architects and Engineers Board in conjunction with the administration, and that's not an untrue statement, because we've got a paper trail of that goes for the last at least year and a half, and I think if we can at least just say that, then whether we take an official action on it or not, that's not an incorrect statement.
I don't think, and again, this is just conversation, but anything you've said on record is basically what I think I just said, that
I'm trying to zero. in light of, we may not be able to make a motion on it, if we go tell our legislatures, anybody in this room or any engineer or whatever that's out there that interacts with their legislatures, and they tell them this language is introduced, was crafted by the Architects and Engineers Board in conjunction with the Administration for Commerce and Insurance, and that would be an accurate statement, and we can make that statement without any kind of, we're stepping out of our lane repercussion, or not repercussion, but stepping out of our lane by saying that, because it's in the minutes, it's in the, it's gone through. To me, it's been vetted through the channels. We just want to make sure that we're not going and saying something on behalf of the Architects and Engineers Board that is not accurate. And again, if it's in the minutes, it seems like then it's accurate, or it's how we need to say it. And this, and I know that sometimes it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal because they've got so many things that compete with their time and attention, that if there's some confusion on, well, why is this here and where's this coming from and why is this over here, then that opens up possibility for somebody to say, well, I think I want to put in here that we're going to let people that have whatever be licensed. And we want to make sure that we've crafted this language in a specific way to do specific things, and to go mess with this language is not what this group, and I'm going to include the administration because we've all been in this together, does. Because we could end up, somebody could come in here and put in, we don't believe anybody ought to be licensed, and that could pass. But that's not the intent of what, and I'm not trying to argue, I'm just trying to get make sure that's strong enough that we've got some backdrop against that. And I'm not saying all this correctly, but
I understand what you're saying, but that the simple fact, if we're going to go with, we're going to say fact, that if this board is going to make a public statement, then it needs to be vetted in the process in which we vet statements from this board.
But it already has been, because we've approved it through the minutes, right?
A discussion about this, in my mind, a discussion about this is not the same as an endorsement after the fact.
But we do have a motion somewhere to send this language to the governor for
Language that we crafted.
And I'm not trying to be, I'm just trying to see where we are. We have motions from this board that says we will send this bill, the language that's crafted, to the governor to be included in their legislative package.
That's a matter of public record.
That's a matter of public record. So we're not saying anything that's out of bounds.
That's not an endorsement.
No, but it is a true statement, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that was done in conjunction with the administration.
Look, if you want to say we fully support this, then that's an endorsement, and the process remains that we'll need to pass that through our communications, our legal, and the upper administration.
Can I ask a quick question?
What is the process for if the board wants to make an endorsement? How long does that take, and when? How's that happen?
Look,
what do we need to do?
I know your day on the Hill is March 1st. An endorsement can be just a couple sentences. I mean, it wouldn't be anything really to craft a statement and send it up and say the board would like to officially, publicly endorse this this bill that has been accepted or been adopted, or been proposed. There it is. Got it. This bill has been proposed in both the House and the Senate.
Current language.
As introduced.
As introduced.
Correct.
We would have to say that.
Correct, because then if it changes, you run the risk of backtracking and
they no longer.
Right. So
how does that happen? The two sentences. How and when, is that in this meeting or is that after this meeting?
That would be.
My feeling is we want to endorse this legislation as written, as introduced, because we propose it. I mean, that's where I think we want to get to.
I fully understand what you're saying.
So how does that happen?
Well, that's the process. We'll craft a statement, probably me.
Okay.
And then with the help of our communications team. and then that will be gone through. That will go then through in this case, probably an expedited approval process. No,
That was,
normal
what is
approval.
expedited, Michael?
I can't tell you that. I don't know, but it wouldn't be. I don't think it would be 2 weeks. You know what I mean?
As long as it's not after the legislature
We can,
is no longer in session.
We can usually move these things pretty quickly, but from an endorsement standpoint, again, it's another public message that's not being delivered in the board meeting, right? It's an endorsement that's going to be made public. It's a statement, so that would have to go through the vetting process.
Robert, I think you.
Yeah, so, having heard all this, I'm going to put it this way. I'm going to make a motion that we endorse the bill as introduced, that the A&E board endorses the bill as introduced, and that would be subject, that endorsement is subject to approval by the proper vetting process through the Commerce and Insurance Department.
Yeah, I mean,
because we just don't have time to come back 2 weeks from now, and unless we call a special meeting to do something like that. I would like to get on the record to say we want to endorse it, but we also want to obviously be respectful of what that procedure is. But you see, I don't want to just, because we don't need to wait 2 or 3 weeks and then 2 or 3 more weeks, and then all of a sudden
you're pre-authorizing or foregoing a review, a secondary review from this body.
And that's exactly what I was trying to do earlier. Let's just go ahead and get it out there that we endorse that, and then you figure out how to get it approved through the Department of Commerce and Insurance.
I mean, and again, that's what I said in my motion, pending approval by the Department of Commerce and Insurance board, department. And that way, if somebody comes back and says, no, we can't do that, then the motion dies. I mean, the whole thing dies. I mean, it's pending or it's up to something. I think that's.
Chairman, could I ask a question?
I think Frank,
Frank, I'm sorry, you get to go first.
Go ahead. I was going to ask Casey a question. Is it enough for you to be able to say that this legislation was submitted from the Tennessee Board of Architects and Engineers?
Who knows what's enough at any time, but I will take whatever I am able to carry.
Understand.
Message wise.
As opposed to an endorsement, just repeating what has happened, where it came from.
It likely just depends. I mean, there's, to be fair, if the administration had carried this bill, it could also be amended. The governor's bills are amended all the time. So it's anytime you open, right this second, the engineer's licensure caption is open over there. It is open. It can be amended to do anything. It can be amended to anything possible under the sun that goes under that caption could happen because that section of code is opened.
And as soon as there's an amendment or endorsement.
Well, for sure. And that's, but I nobody's out there that I'm aware of gunning to do something, nobody's working for evil here. We're just trying to get some people in some legislators' backyard who do not have a pathway to licensure currently to find a pathway to licensure. Same thing we've been working on for years. And everybody feels supportive of that. Even some groups we are often opposed to when it comes to restrictions on licensure and things, they are supportive of that. I just have, as we're all aware, at times been somewhat on the edge of bounds, and I'm trying very hard to not do that again, because in the meetings that I had with both the administration and the Department of Commerce and Insurance, there were parameters around when the bill was somewhat owned by them. I did not suggest anyone run this bill. This bill is right now the property of 2 members to do with what they please. I'm just trying to be supportive of the language in the bill because the department is unable to be so. So if I'm not, nobody is. So I'm trying to protect the language that's in there because we as a profession, engineers as a profession and their professional societies think that that's important and a priority to do. If that makes
Expound
sense.
on that.
Well said. Well said. Any other questions or comments? Rob?
Never mind.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, or a request to make a motion.
I made the motion,
Yeah.
whether, and I think it's an appropriate motion because again, I'm trying to make the motion so that we don't have to come back and make another motion. And be respect again, if this motion is not appropriate and someone says we can't do that, then I put that caveat in.
Conditional
A
motion.
conditional motion, that we have that.
We have a conditional motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, we ready to vote on this motion? Any other comments, questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes conditionally. Pretty good.
If somebody says no.
All right. Michael, I think it's still, I don't know if we finished legislative update with that.
I think so.
Okay, all right.
I mean, look, when I was going to give you a legislative update, I was going to say, hey, great news. The bill has been picked up and it's being carried in both the House and the Senate. And that was, that was going to be it. We went much deeper than I anticipated.
Got it.
But it was a good conversation. Next thing I have here is, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to flip flop these because I think one of them will generate much more discussion than the other.
Okay.
NCARB, NCES upcoming meetings, asking for board approval for attendance to these meetings. The first one coming up is NCARB regional meeting in Charlotte. That will be in early March. I do not expect this to be this might, Rick, is this are you planning on attending that, you or Frank?
I have a conflict for that meeting. Yeah.
And I'm going to attend.
What was that last part?
I'm going to attend virtually.
Okay. So I don't believe that this would be any expenditure to the board for this because NCARB usually funds the member board executive on attendance.
Okay, so we don't need a motion and approval for that.
Not at the moment. Not if either one of these gentlemen don't plan on attending.
You know about Brian? Whether
I'm not aware of Mr. Tibbs' intention. We could always ask him, at a later date. But since we won't have a meeting before then and now,
want to make a motion, just say if Brian wants to go and can go, we would approve him to go. Is that?
I think that's
appropriate?
acceptable. Yes.
Okay. Does anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
All right, second.
Second.
Okay. Any more questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, the next one upcoming is the NCES regional meeting in Oklahoma City. We did discuss this in the Engineers Committee meeting yesterday, and I'm taking probably a little bit of the Engineer Committee report that is forthcoming on this agenda, but I think I have, let's see, Mr. King and Mr. Bursai were elected to be the funded delegates. That would be no cost to this board. my attendance would be no cost to this board. There would be the matter of Mr. Heathcote, Mr. Campbell, and Mr. Bursai attending, which would that would.
I was a funded. I think you said I was a funded delegate.
Mr. Barrick has a conflict of interest, so Mr. Heathcote and Mr. Campbell then would be the two that would need to be funded by the board. So permission needs to be given for that funding.
What about legal? Do we have somebody with legal who would?
Maria, I'm not sure if legal is funded. So the way it works is they fund the member board executive. Like, seeing as how we have two, the land surveyors is separate from you all. I don't know if that opens the door for funding for Maria or not. This is the NCES meeting. Yeah, Tony asked which meeting this was, and this is the NCES meeting in Oklahoma City in April.
Right.
So I'd have to check on that, but just like we did with Mr. Tibbs, there could be a pre-authorization if that funding is not granted. You all could pre-authorize the funding if needed.
I think that whatever motion we make on this attendance, we would want to include if Marie is the right legal person, legal, because we see a big value in legal attending the NCES meetings.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
But that would fall within the travel policies of the department.
Okay. Okay. All right. So do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Frank seconds it. All right. Any more discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Motion passes.
Okay, given the timing on that one, we'll be filling out some travel authorizations. It's not generally considered to be a speedy process. So if I get in touch with you and need some information, please be aware of that it's a time-sensitive matter. The last upcoming meeting, this one is not until June. This is the NCARB annual meeting in Austin, Texas. Again, the same funding is requested for potential members of the board. They will, they fund the member board executive and the attorney. In my experience, they've funded both those for attendance. And I don't know, I don't believe they asked for funded delegates or voting delegates last year, did they? Well, you were going to be the voting delegate, Mr. Thompson, correct?
Right.
Okay. So this is well in advance, and we could revisit this potentially at the April meeting, just in case. But I wanted to go ahead and throw it out there for discussion, and ask for permission for attendance for potentially Mr. Thompson or Mr. Wagster or Mr. Tibbs, should they choose to attend.
Okay.
The quicker we can get a running start on these TAs, the better.
All right. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that typically all of us attend.
Okay.
The architects. So that's what you meant.
Yes.
Not just me or him or yeah.
Well, the three. I did say the three of you.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. But okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good clarification.
So this would be a pre-authorization.
Okay. All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
So move.
All right. Second?
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Michael?
Okay, my last item. I've got the lighter here next to the fuse, ready to go. Future committee meeting schedules is what the item here on the agenda is. And I would like to propose that, given that the engineers committee meeting is the really the only committee that regularly meets prior to every meeting, that we change the schedule that we currently operate under, which is committee meeting the afternoon before, full board meeting the next day in the morning, to a one-day schedule where a committee meeting can be had in the morning. Full board would then convene after a lunch break from the committee meeting, and we can get it all done in one day. So in essence, in my mind, this saves you all time. You would not have to take 2 days off of work. You would only have to take the 1 day off to get the board business done, as opposed to leaving your home or place of business the day before to travel for committee meetings. And if you don't have a committee meeting scheduled before the board meeting, then you could really drive in and drive out if you wanted to. Naturally, for those who travel greater distances, hotel rooms and accommodations that still would carry on. But I feel like in this, it kind of feels like a move towards a more efficient process where we can just kind of roll from one committee meeting to the next committee meeting right into the board meeting. So I welcome discussion on that. If anyone is interested.
Okay. Any comments on Michael's proposal? Frank?
Does the engineering committee complete what they do in 1 hour?
The engineering committee has used a number of different numbers when it comes to hours. In my experience, I'm sorry, Frank. In my experience, I don't think I've been part of an engineering committee meeting that has taken longer than 3 hours. And I've been part of an engineering committee meeting that has taken about 45 minutes. A lot of it comes down to, I'd say the big chunk of it comes down to applications for review and discussion.
And the reason I ask that, I don't want to sound like I, a long time ago, got stuck in a rut, but it used to be the process was the day before the engineering committee met, usually around 1 o'clock, and went as long as they needed on the Wednesday. Committee meeting, for about an hour long at most, would precede the actual board meeting. In other words, we'd have an 8 o'clock architecture meeting, a 9 o'clock definitions. You know what I'm saying? And that way, we can get out of town, if you want to say that, before 5 o'clock.
Sure.
And that seemed to work well. I mean, I may be the only person that thinks that, but I know that's the way we operated for a long time.
Under the way I've been operating since I came on board, committee meetings have been the afternoon before because this full board convenes at 9 a.m. There's not a lot of room for additional committee meetings prior to the board meeting.
It moved to 10.
Oh, that's what I'm proposing. We move the board meeting to 1 and put the committee meetings in the morning on the same day. Now, in my experience, with the exception of the October meeting, where we had convened all committees, if you remember, in the last meeting we talked about having those committee meetings only as needed, which in this case, in October, there may not be the need for those committees to meet. We did decide that the 4 professional committees would meet. But in this case, the 4 professional committees don't meet before every meeting. Only the engineers do. So if we gave the engineers 2 hours in the morning, start at 9 to 11, take a break for lunch, and convene the full board meeting, that would still give us wiggle room to add an additional committee or 2 in the morning if needed. This was just born out of a thought process of saving you all time and allowing you to be where you need to be in terms of your businesses.
I guess, Michael, one of the concerns that I have about that is there are members of the engineering committee that serve on other committees as well. And I don't want to advocate one way or the other on this. I like the way it's set up right now. If somebody's from Memphis or Knoxville or Chattanooga is going to have to drive in and be here at 8 o'clock, that's a pretty tough drive to do all of this, try to cram it all into one day. But
the availability to come the night before and get a hotel room is there.
Agreed. And I think what most people are doing, well, I know the engineers at least, they're driving in from out of town or generally driving in for the engineering committee meeting and getting here at 1 o'clock. And I will say I've been part of engineer committee meetings that lasted 4 hours when we had pretty heavy workload associated with people applying for to sit for the licensing exam, or people applying for comedy that we may have had a lot of discussion on, and other issues that we took up. So I suppose that if necessary, these meetings usually last about 3 hours or so. We could reconvene after that, but then that's if we started at 1 o'clock and it goes to 4, then any committee would be here after 4 o'clock. That seems to be trying to cram a lot into one day, but that's just a thought.
Again, I ultimately this decision rests with you all. I'm just stating that since the engineers committee is the only committee that regularly meets, and in my tenure here with the board, we've never had anything go longer than 3 hours with that committee, that if in fact it is the only committee that's going to meet prior to a board meeting, putting it all on one day would be pretty efficient.
I'll make a comment. Go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead.
Okay. Just for me, coming from Memphis, I guess I have the longest trip. And the thing that the Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning does is limit my stay for one night. And that's personally. And then the other thing is it allows a buffer for engineering meeting if we run into something, and it allows a buffer for the board meeting if we run into something. If we do it all in one day, and we don't finish until 6, I'm probably looking at staying here for 2 nights instead of 1 night. And so the Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning thing are a little more efficient for me, I think. And plus it leaves the buffer that I think is valuable, because it is, I like being efficient and quick with our business, but I also don't want to do it where it gets in the way of us actually tackling and chewing through a problem or whatever comes before us, and we never quite know what's going to come before us. And so having wiggle room is kind of nice. Rob?
Yeah, I've only been around for a year, so I'm a new guy. But I ran a business for 47 years, and we often did not change until somebody new came into the business and said, "Why do you all do this?" And the answer was, "Well, we've always done it that way." And I would be very much in favor of trying this. It doesn't work, it doesn't work. But my experience of the last year is that the workload expands to meet the schedule. We schedule 2 days, we're going to fill up 2 days. We schedule a day, we'll manage to get it done in a day. And I feel like, I mean, I'm not a traveler, and so I'm local, and I have a different set of personal travel issues around that. But for you guys that travel from out of town, the notion that you would come in the night before, and maybe we could have dinner, have a little social time, and then get up and do the business and get you all out of here before, 4 o'clock rush hour traffic. It would seem to me that you would only, under the current circumstances, you lose 2 days of work to do this, and maybe we could get it down to losing a day and an afternoon. I have another question. Is there a reason that we, by statute, that we have to meet 6 times a year? Maybe another alternative to consider is to meet 4 times a year and do it for 2 days. But either way, it's this notion of to me of let's use our time effectively. For me, for example, is a committee meeting on Wednesday is, I'm driving downtown, I'm going back home, I'm driving downtown, I'm going back home. I just soon give you a day and stay with you all day. Local person. So I would be very much in favor of trying this. And if it's a problem, we can do something different.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Good input. Any other comments?
I said tongue in cheek, but you haven't ever driven I-40 west at late in the afternoon with a big bright sun right square in your eyes that your visor won't cover.
You got an office in Memphis. I've done it.
I've about gone blind.
But you have to put the modifier in there that's after 8 hours of meetings. So your brain is oatmeal. No, that's good.
That's me, Rick, and Blair doing that trick. And I'm sure y'all do it probably Robert does it in the morning. Robert and Melanie.
Ricky, if I may, I mean, this debate is healthy, and I'm glad you all are having it. I would like to say that the schedule is dependent on the workload. I mean, if there's multiple committees that need to meet, obviously we're looking at a different time frame. If there's one committee that needs to meet,
right?
Why not?
And let me ask this: does if we know in advance that our engineer committee meeting only has one application to look at, like it did yesterday, I don't know how far in advance we know for sure. But if and where that would only take the hour it took yesterday.
Well, that wasn't even a real application. That was just somebody that wanted to know about engineering technology degrees.
Right. Something that's labeled. Do we have to wait until 1 o'clock to start the board meeting, or could we start the board meeting at 10:30?
We cannot start a meeting early.
That's what I thought.
So whatever time is posted as a start time, within 24 hours of that prescribed start time is now the start time. We can start it late, but we can't go early.
That's what I thought. Okay, thanks. Robert?
I'm not sure that I don't know that I care, although the concerns have been legitimate. I mean, to put in a 8-hour day or whatever and then drive. I mean, I used to be able to do that all day long and twice on Sunday, but it was getting a little hard to do, to do those long days with a drive after it. So, I mean, from that standpoint, I think, but I mean, I'll do whatever everybody thinks. I do think that there is, I'm not concerned about not getting work done, because when I signed up for this board, I knew what the schedule was, and I try to make the appropriate accommodation with either my clients or my folks that work for me or whatever. And then, we've all got emails and virtual stuff that I've done work in the afternoon or evening when it's over. So that part doesn't concern me. The one question I do have is, part of our charter is this board is to serve the people that are registrants, and we're talking about taking a schedule that would be this, but we might do this, but we might go here. I mean, right now we've got some consistency that people that can kind of bank on when we're going to meet and how we're going to meet and what times, and that's been that way for a while. And I'm not just saying we ought to do something because we've done it, but to call in one day and say, well, the engineering committee's meeting this hours or those hours, and No, we're going to meet today on Wednesday because we got a lot of stuff to do, or we've got this. I just wonder how it is perceived by the people that we're trying to serve that may have that consistency built in. I don't know. So that would be my 2 cents.
Good comments. Frank.
I would like to add something as well.
Oh, okay, Blair.
Also, being from Memphis, it doesn't thrill me the thought of getting home at 8 o'clock at night. But it's just not as easy as it used to be. But I'm game to try anything. But I wonder, looking at April, I know that with the Definitions Committee, I believe we're going to have a certainly more than 30-minute meeting for the Definitions Committee. So how does this work if the Engineering Committee goes long and then we have the Definitions Committee following that? Is there flexibility to move or to shift the full board meeting if there's conflict? You see where I'm going? Now, something else that we could do, if we want to leave the Engineering Committee in the morning and then the full board meeting at, say, 1 o'clock, well, then if there are other committee meetings that must meet, then maybe we do that on Wednesday afternoon. Nothing against Nashville, but I have no desire to stay 2 nights.
Understood, Blair. This is Michael. It would all be dependent. I mean, we can always, to answer your first question, we can always start the meeting late. We just can't start it early. So if committee meetings were scheduled like that and they run over, then it doesn't matter at what time we start the meeting if it's late, because that stream will be going. So whoever tunes in at the appropriate time to potentially watch the board meeting would see that we're still in a committee meeting. And then we could move into the board meeting. So outside of that, again, what I had proposed here is that the schedule of the committee meetings reflect the workload. So if the engineers committee meeting only has one application to discuss, like we did yesterday, then 2 days split by an overnight, or a full day split with an overnight seems like we could manage that much more efficiently. And that's all I'm really getting at here is that this thought was born out of saving you all time. And, I don't think I've been part of a full board meeting that's taken more than 2 hours, with the exception of today due to some technical difficulties. But, if that was the case and the engineers were the only committee meeting and they had one application, well, we could get it all done and you guys could be on your way by lunch.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that from the architect standpoint, we review and approve. We review and make approvals outside of committee meetings, and so when we have an architectural committee meeting, it's usually about a specific topic, and it usually lasts 15 minutes, and that probably can be said for being on the landscape subcommittee. That's usually the case. And Melanie, I'll let you speak for the.
But ours ID committees would be the same.
So they move quickly, and to take 3 hours of the day, I assume you have to say when the committee meeting will be due to the sunshine law or whatever, so that everybody will know when to listen in.
Well, if you notice on this last agenda, I posted committee meetings started at 1 o'clock, but that was the only time listed. So
I did notice that.
Yeah. So subsequently, we just took a 5-minute break in between each committee meeting and rolled through, as opposed to, like what we did in October, how everyone committee got scheduled on an hour. If your committee only took 15 minutes, well, then it was 45 minutes of wasted time. So those are the things that I'm looking at trying to speed up, and that's, again, it's born out of consideration for your time and your travel.
And the other thing is, we typically don't even need to have a meeting. Now, one thing, this is a different subject, but I think I saw that Kara is leaving.
Yes, and Kara Evans has accepted another position, and her last day with us will be on February 18th, which is a Friday.
And where I was going with that is, again, that I think is a question, and it has to do with the definitions committee. And I've heard it said previously that maybe that ought to be done in the board meeting, just because everybody needs to have a piece of this, and whether there's a big separate definitions committee meeting where everybody's part of the meeting, or how that's structured, I'm not offering up anything, but I think when we get down to deciding what everybody, saying I don't like anything the engineers, however that goes, we all need to be there. And so, is there a possibility that moves into a part of the agenda on the board meeting?
Well, do you want me to answer? Yeah, well, so, yesterday there was a meeting of the Definitions Committee. We didn't have an architect present for that meeting, so conversation kind of fumbled around for a little bit, and then questions were brought up, and it was decided to table the definitions discussion until the April meeting. Currently, under the current plan, the Definitions Committee would then meet, discuss the items, the definitions, the AIA submitted comments, all of those, and either make a recommendation to the full board or not, at which time I think, in this body, there would be healthy discussion on the recommendations that were made by the board, by the committee. So in this instance, maybe you're right. Maybe it would be more beneficial to make that an aspect of the meeting itself with everybody present, so that all of those comments and questions could be heard at one time, as opposed to kind of doing it twice.
Exactly. Rehashing it again. That's where I was headed there.
I think the purpose of having the definitions committee was to kind of hammer through details that didn't involve all of us. But it does make sense if we get it down to a point where the committee feels like we're pretty much there. That seems like the right time to bring it back to the big board as a recommendation from the committee. Is that what you're saying, or is that not what?
I was kind of thinking more as each individual profession think this is where they are.
I know on the engineering committee, we got to that point.
Well, if everybody's at that point, I think everybody needs.
You're saying, okay, well, you're saying we're there.
No, well, yeah. I mean, Blair, you're the chair, but, yeah.
Well,
I think so.
I think having the committee meeting at the board meeting may be helpful, because we'll have more opinions. But I also like the idea of it being separate, so we can bring our findings back to the board for the full board's review.
Do we have an option any longer to have committee meetings through WebEx?
Under our current operation, meetings and quorum need to be met in person. Like as today, for example, we have a full quorum that is present, but there's one who's attending virtually, and that's okay. But we can't have full meetings conducted virtually.
What is required to change that?
Changing the law.
Or
in view of the fact that the world has changed and we all do Zoom every day, all day, and we've been doing it for 2 years,
I know where you're going. I can't speak to something I'm not privy to. But I do know that discussions around this theme have been had by other folks, by leadership and people who are, Go ahead, Stuart.
In the past, it was done by executive order, and that executive order, of course, has been terminated. That's why we don't have it. But the quorum has to be present. But to answer your question, that is a legislative change.
And I understand for a board meeting that might be true, but for a committee meeting?
And we have discussion, but not make motions and conduct voting.
And the work of a
And
committee is to grind around and deal with something, but they can't adopt anything. They can't make anything happen. All they can do is come to the board and recommend. So why does that committee have to meet in person?
Stepped out. Tony Glenn, one of your chief counsel. Is the question why the committee has to meet in person as opposed to?
Why does it, if the committee is not making recommendations and not making decisions for the board, it is just the members of the board in a subcommittee hashing something out. Why does there have to be a quorum physically present in the room to have that committee meeting?
That is my understanding. Is that came from the commissioner's office.
So that wasn't a legislative act.
That is not a legislative act.
Could we just ask if that would be okay?
You all could do that in whatever form. But
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, just clarifying that it's the board meeting that must be in person, have a quorum in person.
For the committee meetings, we could have meetings, we could have parties present. But for example, yesterday, because we didn't have a physical quorum in a committee meeting, we weren't able to put forth motions and vote.
No, as of yesterday, you all appointed another committee member to sit on behalf, and that's what created your physical quorum.
Right. So if we don't meet in person, and so there's this thing about physical and virtual, I guess. So if we meet virtually, it sounds to me like there would be restrictions, but we could have conversation that we could then bring to the board at the next board meeting.
Well, you're not asking a legal question. It's not a question of what is the law. It's a question of what the commissioner has determined will happen for boards. So, I think you could take that question and move it forward if you wanted to. But I just can't answer that. I'm sorry, because it's not a legal question is what I'm trying to say.
Michael, on maybe Ricky needs this, but on behalf of this board, could we ask you to ask the commissioner if it would be okay if we had working committees meet virtually?
Just so long as you understand I'm the messenger.
I'll go with you if you're afraid of getting shot.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'd be happy to carry that message on.
Spirit of efficiency and doing a good job for the citizens of Tennessee, I'd like to ask you to do that.
Rob has caught me in my own words. But no, that's any proposal that you all would like me to carry regarding that, I'm happy to do so.
Robert? Yeah. I'm going to push back just a little bit on what Rob said. I'm not a huge fan of just virtual meetings. I don't know that they're more efficient. I don't think you get as much done, but again, because I don't do them properly, I have seen too many. There's not enough participation in those meetings a lot of times, and people are more easily distracted when they're not in person. So I don't know that they're more efficient. That's my opinion. Not I may be wrong, but that's my opinion.
Rob, do you still have a comment? Did you say?
That was from about an hour ago.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Okay, it's a timing thing. Rick.
If it was Frank's, it would have fallen over.
Frank throws his.
We need a bigger base on the side.
I guess my question is that if we decide that we would like to do this in a day, and possibly could we start earlier in order to make sure instead of 9 we can start at 8?
Do that.
And then we could play this by ear because every meeting's different. I mean, at the next meeting, you guys may have 50 applications, and you can't do them on Thursday or whatever the meeting is, and then you sort of play it by ear. And as long as we meet the requirements for the advertising, right? We can do a 1 day or a 2 day.
Correct.
So we don't.
And
have...
we'll know. When I send out, I try and send out the meeting materials at least a week in advance, and we post the meeting dates. When we set all the meeting dates back in the December meeting, they were posted on our website before we left this room. So those dates are set. But if you all, I think this may help out, I'd like to recognize Assistant Commissioner Martin, who's joined us here. And he might be able to speak to some of the quorum questions. And actually, I think he might be able to help us out with the legislative endorsement questions and those types of things. So I'd like to include him in the conversation.
Thank you, Michael, and sorry to interrupt. So wanted to be responsive to the phone a friend message that I received. So I wanted to come down and just say a few words about the A&E bill and the deduplication efforts that I think this board has previously taken up. So I just wanted to clarify and say on the record, I think it's a totally appropriate message for the trade associations to say that this board has voted in approval of the deduplication legislation and those additional pathways to licensure. That was a public conversation, and this board voted publicly in favor of that proposal. I do want to clarify that while the department is supportive of those alternative pathways to licensure, it's not an administrative bill. So I just wanted to come down and say that on the record and clarify.
Alex, thank you very much. And I think that's what we were getting at is we've been through this vetting process for a long time that has been public. It's in minutes. It's everywhere. And for us to not be able to say that to the legislature, that doesn't seem appropriate. I mean, and I would like to, well, I mean, we can discuss that later. That's good. But it has been done in conjunction with the department. I mean, we've not done this in a vacuum either. So I just, so that everybody knows we're working together and we're not at odds with each other, I think is important as well.
Yes, sir, absolutely. As you mentioned, those conversations have been, again, occurring on the record for probably 2 years at this point. If there's any questions on that or any concerns, happy to speak about it. If you want to talk about the board flexibility bill, I'd be happy to address that as well.
Make sure you all, any other questions about okay. Yeah, and so they were, conversation has come up about schedule flexibility and needs for physical quorum, especially pertaining to committee meetings. If you would have anything you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our current posture has been to have a physical quorum for any meeting that is noticed and open to the public. I think in the current environment that would include committee meetings, but I will say, and to venture from the previous legislation we were discussing, there is a bill currently working its way through the legislature that is an administrative bill that would address giving boards the flexibility to meet remotely. I would think that would capture committees as well. That board, again, that bill was filed from the governor's office. It wouldn't require boards necessarily to meet remotely, but they would have that option. They would have that flexibility.
So to make sure we understand, right now the full board meeting and committee meetings need to be in person, is what?
Yes, that's correct. Without a statement of necessity, that's the case, and utilizing that legal authority, there's not really that justification on on a regular occurrence basis. If this bill were to become law, obviously the board has that flexibility, and there's no need to justify it. The board would have that flexibility to make that determination. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Any other questions for the assistant commissioner? Frank?
I guess one, this is out of ignorance, but if that gets through the legislature, exactly how long would it take for that to actually be used by this board?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think some of that depends on when the bill makes its way through the committee process, that sort of thing. I'm not. Most of those bills have an effective date, but typically as soon as it's signed by the governor, it would be effective. And we might cite that bill number for the board members if they or at some point share that in case they want to watch that through the legislative process.
Well, Mr. Campbell, don't you look things up, don't you?
I've got the internet, yes, and I can look that up and find out where that's at. Sure.
Okay. I'll take care of the looking up, and I'll get you all a link so that you can all take a look at it.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for allowing me to interrupt. Always good to see you all. Appreciate our board members, and just wanted to come down and address a couple of those items. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And next time you come, make sure you bring Ralph's Donuts with you.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of things here. As far as the meeting schedule, Michael, I don't know if we brought this up. You've heard our comments. If it's just you take those comments into consideration when you set the schedule, do you want us to make a motion and vote? I don't. I mean, I'm like Robert. I'll do whatever the board wants to do or you want to do, and that's fine. But you've heard our comments.
I don't know if it requires a motion. I think maybe just an understanding that and a trust that if I see a light load, then you all will likely do it all in one day. If it's a heavy load, we can separate it as needed. But given that we haven't had a whole lot of engineering applications for review in the last few meetings. Things seem to be moving pretty smoothly. That this could be a very real possibility that we could be in and out, from 8 to noon, get everything done, and you all be on the road for lunch. You know what I mean? So, I mean, what I'm getting at is again, depending on workload, if it's a light load, I'm just asking for the flexibility to schedule this all in one day. Again, if we have only one committee meeting, but it appears to be a 2 to 3 hour load, still we could do it in one day. If we have 5 committee meetings, that's a different story, right? That's clearly calls for more time. So that's what I'm asking for, is the ability, the flexibility to create a schedule out of necessity based on the workload.
Okay. That's Rick, go ahead.
Just one comment that, I'm in full support of that. In our licensure requirements throughout the country, it's different. Some meet quarterly, and you can't get your license in a timely manner if you need that. So I just want to be careful that if we're not going to have our every other monthly meet, we're better. Tennessee's better than a lot of states in regard to that. We're reviewing and approving where we have that ability to do that without being at this board meeting. But I just don't want to get it where we're being more restrictive to our professions because it's convenient to us.
And I would ask Tony to correct me if I speak out of turn here, but statutorily, our boards are only required to meet once a quarter. The adoption of an every other month was taken on by this board sometime before I started with you all. So statutorily, once a quarter is all that's needed. That's the requirement. Committee meetings are as needed, and all of the approvals are not done at the board level, they're done at the committee level. So applicant approvals, architects, interior design, engineers, you all get sent those. And we usually have 3 people. If there's a tie, one approves, one disapproves. There's usually a third person who then, in some cases, we can send it to a third person as a tiebreaker. And so if 2 approve and 1 disapprove, then motion carries. So, we can do things like that, or we can continue having the committee meetings as you all do.
Other comments?
This is not relating to that comment. However, it does relate to the schedule for an upcoming meeting. I would like for the grants committee to have a discussion about accredited interior design programs versus accredited interior architecture programs. And it's a fine language in there, in that we are providing grant funds to interior architecture programs.
Is there really such thing? No.
They are allowing the students to graduate with a major of interior architecture. So it's a discussion that I think that we need to have within the grants committee in order to make sure our language.
Are they accredited as an interior architecture school or an interior design school?
CETA accredits interior design programs, but the major is interior architecture, and they are calling the departments interior architecture. It's a conversation that I think we need to have.
I agree.
And there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done to get this clarified, to make sure that we know where our funds are going and how they are being used and so forth to the interior architectural programs. It's a conversation that needs to happen.
We ask, Michael, that you convene during the, April meeting schedule, the Grants to Higher Education Committee.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Rick?
There is no test for that. So it's misleading, and we've talked about this for years. And we've talked to the different universities that say that, and it's disingenuous for them to say that, because that is not a true profession. Now, you can be an architect who specializes in interior design, but you can't be an interior designer who's an architect. So we can talk some more about it. We've been talking about it for years, and we've had conversations with the various universities over this, and it just goes right over, deaf ears. So if you go into a program and you think for 1 minute that you're going to be an architect because they say that it's interior architecture, that's so disingenuous. And when you get out, and we've had people, talk to us about it in our office. Well, what kind of a job can I get? Well, you can't be an architect unless you go to architecture school. And I don't know, we can talk more about this, and I'll be glad to, but it's a horse we've been beating for years.
Does the architectural committee have anything formal that they've entered about their opinion about this?
Years ago, there's minutes of our conversations where we just said it's not a program. You can say it's a program. It doesn't matter what university you are. Some universities may have a dual degree, and that's different. But you can't go to an interior design school and call yourself an interior architect legally. You can't get licensed for that, and that's disingenuous. And it's just it's the same thing we go through all the time with people coming and applying for a job. Well, wait a minute. Well, no, I'm sorry, but that's not the reality of it, and that's why we've had this struggle for the last several years with, what does it mean? Why can't I do that? I'm an interior designer, and I went to a school that says I'm an interior architect. Well, you're not an architect. And I'm not meaning that in a negative way against interior designers. I have great interior designers that actually know more than some of my architects do because they've been trained in my office, and we've trained them appropriately, but they're still interior designers. They're not architects or interior architects. They're interior designers. And I'm get off my soapbox, but that is just, I don't know why it continues to be that way, other than the universities are taking advantage of a situation for tuition, and they're misleading the students.
Robert? So, to quote a great Memphian, Elvis Presley, let's talk a little more action here. Seems to me that we've talked about it, right? So let's file a complaint. They're using the wrong appellation of the word architect in their literature. I mean, we just had a complaint that we had talked about today where they had it in their literature, their social media, whatever. Let's file a complaint. Find every one of them we've got out there, file a complaint. Let's go do it. I mean, there's a point where that's why we have the complaint process and the discipline process. And I have no idea who these people are, but you all do. File a complaint or let's get it to the staff or whatever, because if we're using terminology incorrectly at that level, then all that does is permeate through the rest of their career. And, if it's being done by the schools, so let's file a complaint. I mean, if there's 2 or 3 that are doing it, let's file a complaint, put them on notice, and put them out. When we do a newsletter, put them out in front of everybody and say, the school of something, something, something got a complaint filed against the A&E board for the wrong use of it. Maybe that stops the
appellation architect.
They are not using the term architect. They are using the term interior architecture.
Same difference.
And
I
they
would argue
are,
that's the same
here's the challenge is that the universities are saying that they are in the right to use the term interior architecture. And they have the students sign a waiver saying that they cannot refer to themselves as an interior architect. So it's a mess. It is a hot mess. It is a significant problem in the interior design profession. We heard it from CIDQ. They do not support, that's the qualification, NCIDQ is the qualification exam. They are not in support of it. CETA has taken the position, and that's the accreditation board, that they do not have control over the universities as to how they label their major and their program. And we as a profession are in dispute of that with CETA. So professionally across the country, everyone is upset about it. So we'd have to be very careful with how we approach the universities. And I think it can start with the grants. I think we need to have a position, have a statement.
Make a distinction.
Yes.
And Frank, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I disagree. They're using the wrong term. Doesn't matter if they're a university, if there's somebody out here that's got a shingle on Broad Street, right? They're using the wrong term. And if it's something that we need to take further, and we believe it's a real issue that's causing harm to the public health, safety, and welfare, let's file a complaint and get them on the record and find out. I mean, just our job is different than the IDQ. Excuse me. See, I go get the acronyms messed up. But our job's different. Just because they disagree or don't think they do, we've got some authority here. So at least in the state of Tennessee, we need to do that, because it happens on every profession, on every level, where people use those wrong terms, and it puts the people that we're supposed to be protecting in harm's way. So let's file a complaint and go do it.
If I may, Ricky, I'm sorry. Before we get too far away from the agenda here, can we go back to the meeting schedule and get a final discussion on that. I'm happy to have this discussion after, before, we've gone a little bit of ways from that meeting discussion. If we could get a final say-so on that, I'd appreciate it, and then we can talk about whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking we reached a point where we didn't need a vote, we didn't need a motion.
Okay.
You had an understanding.
Okay, good.
And-
I just wanted to hear that. I don't think that those words were actually spoken. So.
Right.
Okay.
And I think this came up because
Thank you.
we were saying we might need some committee meetings.
Sure.
That Melanie was
And as
bringing
it pertains to this subject, I don't know which committee it would be, but I feel like the professional committee, more so than the Grants to Higher Education Committee, would be the appropriate place to have this discussion, whether it be the Architects Committee or the Interior Design Committee or both. I think that the establishment of a ruling from those committees with an adoption from the board would supersede anything that the Grants to Higher Education Committee would do. So if they establish the rules for the usage of the term, then the Higher Education Committee would there fall in line. So again,
Frank, are you ready?
Oh, can I speak?
Sorry, Frank. I thought
Yes,
you were
sir.
gonna throw your placard, so I got nervous.
Yes,
I
sir.
almost forgotten what I was going to say.
Robert
You were gonna throw it again, so I got nervous.
Robert beat you by like 2 seconds, and
Yeah, I mean-
that caused you,
I guess my question would be to Melanie, because when she brought this up, I thought where she was headed was in these people that we're giving grants to. If you're calling yourself interior architecture, you're off the list.
That's where
And
I think we need to have that discussion.
That's the statement.
That would, make somebody perk up and listen to you. Now I got to admit, if it's only a few $1,000s and they're making a whole lot more money because they're calling themselves interior architecture, they may not care. But I'm just saying that may make them blink anyway.
Yeah, and that's an item for whatever, maybe a couple of committees. But you're right. I mean, it may come down to a point where we've got to take a stand on what we believe in, whether that's a ding on them or not, whether they consider that a problem or not. We don't want to disagree with the term and then be giving money to them just because that's how the stand we're taking. Rob.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go back to the issue of schedule to make sure we have closure.
Okay.
And I don't know that this needs a motion, but I would like to have a clear understanding. And I think what we have said to Michael is, and I'm going to define this, he's going to talk to the chairs of the committees before a meeting to see if they need to meet and how long they need to meet. And then we've given him the authority to decide whether we can do this in a day or not. Are we good with that?
Yeah, I think we've given Michael discretion after he gets all the input to the flexibility to either keep it at 2 days or go with 1 day, depending on what's on deck. And we'll see how it works. If we're staying 2 nights for six meetings in a row, we might have a rebellion. But Robert?
okay. Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Bursay.
Okay. I just want to go back. Frank, I agree. That's why I said we need to file a complaint, because I'm not sure that a few $1,000s is going to be a deterrent, and do both of them. I mean, there's nothing that says we can't do both of those things, but I think having your name in a complaint registry that's published is a pretty good indication that you need to change your behavior. I mean, to me, if I saw my name out there, that would also be a dissuader. So.
All us engineers over here are saying, you go, girls.
Okay, I think, Michael,
I think that included you, Rick.
we were officially in the director's report.
Done.
You are done.
I'm
Okay.
done. We can hit the committee
So
reports.
committee reports, I will say, I mean, do we need to take a break, or you want to power through?
We're almost there. Let's go.
Let's
power through.
Drive on.
Okay. All right. Engineer committee is first up.
Engineers Committee met for 45 minutes. We spent a good little while talking to a gentleman who wanted us to do something that we were not allowed by statute or law to do. We had no other issues regarding applications to discuss. We had a report from Casey, and we adjourned.
Okay. Any questions for the chair? Okay. Outreach committee. Steve.
Thank you, Ricky. We did meet. We continued our discussion about the newsletter that we're working on. We have a commitment from several members to work on articles that'll be submitted to Michael for internal review, and we're working toward getting those in the next few months with a potential deadline of June, I think, for submittal. Obviously, the earlier the better, but we're working toward a newsletter to be sent out in August.
That is correct.
Okay.
That's our current goal.
And one of the things that we have suggested, and Melanie has agreed to coordinate, is the topic you all have just been discussing, the interior architecture situation. We think that's an important thing for the board to have in the newsletter, and the potential legislation, or the actual legislation that's going on right now. There may be an update for that. And there's one other thing you were going to do, Ricky. What was that?
Right. Write an article about our legislative, alternative paths to licensure and the definitions.
Yes,
just
that's right.
what we've been doing. Yeah.
Right. That's the report. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need to, Melanie, do we need to get one of the architects committed to helping you co-author this article?
Either one or both.
Both.
Or three. 2 or 3, or
okay.
Anybody who would like to contribute.
So Frank and Rick, are you guys in on co-authoring with Melanie? Yes. Okay, good. I thought you might.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Michael, quick question regarding this article about interior architecture. Would it be more prudent to wait until after the committee meetings before an article like this is penned?
Possibly so.
I will counter saying, why not pen it? We don't have to publish it if we think it ought to be held, but I think we need to start formulating and writing these things we've been talking about. That would be my suggestion. Sure. Let's get it written, and then we'll have flexibility.
Okay. I was just thinking that after the committees got together to discuss it, that a position would be formulated in that process.
It could affect it, but
okay, that's fine.
Okay,
thank you.
Is that okay? No. Rick?
Yeah, I'm not sure how far back the minutes would retrace a lot of conversations we've had, because we've talked about this for several years, and so I think that we could come up with something fairly quickly, because it's pretty clear what's going on. But I agree, we don't need to just come out with something right away. But I'm not sure what the terminology. I know that they modify the terminology. Instead of an interior architect, it's interior architecture, and there's some little.
Get to look at our laws and
rules. There's some little quirky things in the laws, and that's how I think that people have been getting around that title. That it's the Title Act, right? Basically,
right.
So
Title Act.
Yeah. So that's part of this discussion, and it needs a little more vetting, and I think legal could help us tremendously on that. What's allowed and what is not allowed. And just because I'm saying it this way, does that make it okay? So I think we do
Okay.
need to pull our circle the wagons, as they like to say.
Got it.
So, all right, thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Steve, on the outreach committee?
No.
Okay. Definitions committee. Blair?
Thank you. The definitions committee met yesterday, and we each had the opportunity to discuss the definitions that are out there of all of our professions: architecture, engineering, interior design, and landscape architecture. We had a healthy discussion. It was really good. We also reviewed the definition notes as provided by Tennessee AIA, which I felt was very helpful too, and generated some of that healthy discussion. So it was all good. For example, one consideration to utilize for all or each profession would be to add an incidental to practice statement for each of our definitions. But those are things we'll discuss in the coming meeting. And we do plan to meet, I believe, in April at our next meeting. And I think this will probably be longer than a 30-minute meeting because we need to delve in and hopefully get done sooner than later on this. So it's our intent to move as fast as we can, but we need to be very thorough. So April is our next meeting, and then Michael, if y'all will get that scheduled, that would be great. That's the end of the report.
Okay. Thank you, Blair. All right. That brings us down to old business. Any old business that we need to discuss? Okay. All right. That brings us down to adjournment. Do we have a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. We don't need to vote on that, I don't think. So we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Blair.